Today I wanted to make a video breaking down a poem by Rilke. And it's from this book that I've been working through, then taking very long breaks and coming back to, but one that I'm really enjoying, called Rilke's Book of Hours. The subtitle is Love Poems to God. And this book was written by Rilke when he lived in a Russian monastery in his 20s. And all of these poems, as you can imagine, relate in some way, shape, or form to his relationship with God and understanding what God is to him. And uh, all of the poems on the left side of the page are in German, and then the English translation is on the right side. And I'm about halfway through it right now, and the book is, like they're the type of spirituality and encounter with God that he experienced was one that was very relational in this time period in his life. A lot of the poems talk about, the ways that through communion with God, God becomes more real. And it's really this kind of encounter between him and God as opposed to kind of God, this external thing that he's trying to kind of understand. Um, and I've really appreciated that aspect of it because it really feels like you're going on a journey with him throughout this book, and he's continuing to evolve his understanding, um, become more intimately acquainted with God. And so this poem is one that I read today, um, about an hour ago, and I've kind of been thinking about it and trying to understand it. And so I'm going to be bringing in some level of analysis that I've already done, but a lot of it's just going to kind of come out in the moment and kind of flow, and we'll see where it goes. And I'm doing this video because I realize that a lot of times I can read and take notes about a poem and kind of do some practices around, what I think the author is invoking and what it's being evoked in me. But it just feels like the stakes are raised when you make a video, and I feel like the connection I can make to a poem is more alive in that sense than if I'm just writing it. I'm also just someone who likes to kind of think out loud anyways, so I hope that more of these will be made, more of these videos about breaking down poems, maybe, just working through this book. Um, so yeah. Um, what I'm gonna do is this poem has technically five verses, but really four because one verse only has one line. So I'll probably just combine that with the last one. So I'll read them verse by verse and then give my thoughts, and then do the next verse, give my thoughts, and then as I go down, I'll try and kind of find that cohesive thread between all of them. Um, Unfortunately, with this book, there are no titles for any of these poems, at least not in this edition. I have looked up, I did find a translation of this poem online, and there was a title, but I don't know if that's a title that the person who wrote and published the translation created after the fact. I'm just gonna honor this book and go off of there being no titles. Um, you also don't know when each individual poem was written and was published. You just know that this book comprised this time in Rilke's life. And then Rilke, when he moved back to Germany after living in Russia, wrote all of these poems. So I don't have a title and I don't have a specific year. Um, but it was around the 1890s, early 1900s. Okay. So the first verse. The poets have scattered you. A storm ripped through the stammering. I want to gather you up again in a vessel that makes you glad. So what immediately jumps out at me is the first line. The poets have scattered you. So who are the poets? Um, I'm imagining, Rilke was born in 1875. Um, so when he was in his 20s, it was around the turn of the 20th century. Um, excuse me. Did I have that? I think I have it 100 years ahead of, I really should have written this down. 1875. Okay, yeah. 1875 to 1926. So, that period of time, um, that's like after the Romantics. Um, who knows if he's writing about poets in his contemporary, of his contemporaries, of the people that lived at the same time or kind of leading up to that. But I immediately thought of the Romantics. Because like what I know about a lot of the Romantics is you know, they spoke about God and the natural world in a way that was very idealized and bordered on idolatry in many cases. And it was kind of this time of like, you know, self a real emphasis on self-expression and self-discovery. And so I can imagine for Rilke that if he's talking about the Romantics or just at that general time, um, that God almost meant something different to every single person, and there was very little unification. Um, also like this time was, the heels of the Protestant Reformation, where there's this big, division between all of these Protestant sects of Christianity that are arising and deep factions, between all of them, every, every group seemingly having a different idea about what it means to be a Christian, what God is, what God isn't, who are Christians, who aren't Christians. Um, and I think this line is Rilke expressing this feeling of God not holding this um unified, strong um sense for him. That it's yeah, there's this division, there's this fragmentation of sorts. Then the second line, a storm ripped through the stammering. I was thinking the stammering was kind of this like unintelligible kind of disruption connected to the first line about the scattering. The scattering and the stammering seem to be connected. Um, that that in all of these different poets and scholars and various voices, there's a lot of noise. Um, but there's not a lot of clear truth. Seems like storm ripped storm ripped through the stammering. Yeah, so kind of this image of the storm, like kind of wreaking havoc. I want to gather you up again in a vessel that makes you glad. So this is kind of now transitioning. So the first two lines were kind of setting the kind of problematizing for the reader what Rilke feels as the state religiosity as a whole is, and specifically for him, kind of making sense of religion is. And then the second two lines kind of set the stage for the rest of the poem about what it is Rilke sees as honoring God, being a Christian as he feels called to. So I want to gather you up again is putting the pieces that were scattered, all these different kind of like I'm almost thinking of like the idea of a Horcrux in Harry Potter, like all of these like different parts of one's soul that have been like distributed in different places. And, not one of them comprises the whole, but they are a part of the whole. So kind of like all these different shards of God that are scattered about, um, wanting to bring those back to some collective whole. Uh, and that's going to be an important thing to remember throughout the rest of the poem. And a vessel that makes you glad. So kind of this idea of honoring God, you know, Rilke seeing his way of glorifying God is gathering these pieces together. Okay, so on to the next verse. I wander in the thousand winds that you are churning, and bring back everything I find. So I looked up the thousand winds on Google because I was curious if that had been repeated somewhere else, if that was like some term that had been used through history or mythology. And I was finding it had been mentioned in like a anime or something. Uh and then it was also a poem that was written in like 1995. Um, so I couldn't find anything that predated Rilke, but people do say that the Thousand Winds kind of represents like immortality, um, kind of this like ephemeral energy, and it yeah, it can be used to represent God. Um, so I don't know if that rang true for Rilke, but I'm kind of getting this sense of like this like the thousand winds is not winds in the literal sense. It's like it's it means something different. Um, means something more more spiritual in some way. So I wander in the thousand winds that you are churning. So you are churning. So God is, I guess that might answer my query, right? Like God is in this wind. God is making this wind occur, churning the wind and bring back everything I find. So Rilke is wandering in this field that contains the energy of God, um, and churning. It sounds violent. It sounds scary. Like I'm imagining like he's walking in like a tornado or a hurricane or um an intense experience of weather. But he's trying to bring back everything he can find. He's trying to bring back all of those scattered pieces. Um, okay, so the next verse. The blind man needed you as a cup. The servant concealed you. The beggar held you out as I passed. The blind man needed you as a cup. The servant concealed you. The beggar held you out as I passed. Kind of want to sit with this one a little bit. Nothing's coming to me immediately, but I sense there's a lot of important insights to be grasped from this. I guess this could, but before trying to go into, and maybe that's not even like what I end up doing, but before going into like each role here, the blind man, the servant, the beggar, and trying to understand what he was trying to say metaphorically with what each of them, how each of them related to God. I think more generally, this verse points to the fact that God has been scattered because for each of these people, God represents something different. They are using God in a different way. Um, God serves a different utility for each of them. And that's informed by the roles in society that each of them take. Um, so like thinking of, God being concealed for the servant, like this the God for a servant is first and foremost their master, who they're obedient to. That's who their fate in this earthly reality is tethered to. And so and potentially they are obedient to a master that doesn't honor their God. And so they have to, out of their own protection, out of their own safety, conceal God. Um, the beggar held you out as I passed. Yeah. Yeah, this one's a little tricky. Um, maybe as I keep reading, maybe it'll make more sense. Yeah. I'll go to the last verse and then see if that one as I break down this last verse kind of comes into the picture. You see, I am one who likes to look for things. I am one who, barely noticed, like a shepherd, comes up from behind. One who dreams of making you complete, and in that way completes himself. Yeah, this verse I really love. Um, so I am one who barely noticed, like a shepherd, comes up from behind. So the 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 symbol of the shepherd as the sacrificial person who lays down their life for their sheep, the good shepherd laying down their life in order to glorify God, this sacrifice for um for the Father. So barely noticed. So not someone who takes pride in their own accomplishments, in their own status, in their own image, who very humbly serves God. Um, one who dreams of making you complete, and in that way completes himself. So this connects back to the beginning of the poem about gathering God up again in a vessel that makes him glad. Like this sense that God is needs to be put together, that there are all of these puzzle pieces of God that their collective intelligibility has been lost. And Rilke seeing his purpose in putting God back together, in reestablishing a God that feels strong, that feels like it has integrity, that feels like it has weight, that feels like it includes all of creation. You know, that's what Christians believe is God is in all things. God is in all creation. And God created all creation. And so not only did was God the instrument by which everything that we know as life today exists at the hands of, but that he is contained in all of us as well. And so I I think Rilke, like through putting God back together, is in another sense putting himself back together, and by extension putting the people around him together. Because the scattering and the division that he alludes to is not only related to the scattering of God. It's the division and the polarity that he sees in his world, that he sees potentially within himself. And the reunification of that allows will allow him to feel that way as well. Blind man needed you as a cup, servant concealed you, beggar held you out as I passed. And this idea, like the last two lines, one who dreams of making you complete and in that way completes himself. It really goes to the concept of a personal relationality with God, that in serving God, I'm serving myself because I am in God. I am God's son. Um, that is something that Rilke really understands and is just so pervasive through all of these poems in this book. And like a lot of his poems, and it's mentioned here in the book jacket that where is it? There's a reciprocal relationship between the divine and the ordinary in which God needs us as much as we need God. And that's in a lot of the other poems, it's him talking about like, you know, like God needing him. Um, kind of, kind of similar to Jesus's cry on the cross, like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like there's a lot of that spirit and a lot of that energy in a lot of his poems in this book. is like crying out to God. Um, either in a disappointed, like on his knees, kind of in despair, or in a poem like this, like this positive energy, there's almost this mission that he's on to to glorify God by stitching him together. Um, that's really beautiful. Yeah, and that like that really connects to a sense that I've been feeling lately that like the moments that I feel most in touch with God are the moments that I'm feeling the Holy Spirit within me. Um, and that there is this being in touch with, you know, the Trinity, which includes Jesus, the human, which is God, which is like transcends and includes God, um, but is also the experience of the spirit in the human. And yeah, I'm curious how this poem about like the scattering, the image of the scattering, God is being scattered, like the people that were scattering him, like did they know that they were doing that? Like was that an intentional attempt to like maybe like bring God out of dogma and out of the church into personal relationship? Um, because I mean, like, you know, as much as I was talking about that in the beginning, like potentially leading to the scattering, it's like I also then said that that is an integral part of um being in relationship with God is a ever developing, like continuously renewing relationship that is so deeply personal. But if that's taken to a point where one isn't embedded in a community of other believers who are like identifying blind spots in one's theological worldview, um, that aren't people whereby one can serve something beyond themselves, if people fall prey to self-deception and kind of become so far removed from like the tradition of Christianity, where God is like God loses its sanctity or something. Like it becomes kind of like, I don't know, like an imaginary friend that like doesn't have like the feeling of like being beyond and above one. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the I don't know what Rilke felt as the scattering, like what that phenomenon was like for him. But clearly he saw it as a problem, and clearly he saw his purpose as putting God back together. Yeah, I think that's about all that I have for this video. I hope that was of some use to someone. Um, Let me know what you think in the comments. Um, and I hope to be doing one of these very soon. So thank you. Have a great day.